Hey, I'm golf broadcaster Matt Adams. The updated and expanded second edition of my book, The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments, is now available. Readers can expect to march with Arnie's Army at the 1960 U.S. Open, relive Jack Nicklaus's remarkable 1986 Masters win, and be amazed by the Tiger Slam. The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments. Pick it up where fine books are sold, including BarnesandNoble.com and Amazon.com.
This day in sports history. It's May 27th, and on this day in 1991, the Chicago Bulls finally beat the Detroit Pistons to advance to the NBA Finals. The Pistons were the bad boys. They played a style of basketball that relied on intimidation and physicality. Hard fouls were the norm. Come close to the rim, and Bill Laimbeer or Rick Mahorn were going to make sure that you felt it. Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumars, Vinnie Johnson, Dennis Rodman, Mark Aguirre were all part of the mix that brought NBA titles to the Motor City in 1989 and again in 1990. For the previous 3 years, the Pistons had met the Chicago Bulls in the playoffs, and in all of those meetings, the Pistons had beaten them. Now here in the 91 edition, the much-improved Bulls had zoomed through the playoffs, sweeping the Knicks in the first round, losing only one game against the 76ers in the second round, and now on this day enter the game with a 3-0 lead over the aging Pistons. It was the Bulls and their triangle offense trying to put an end to not only the Pistons' dominance, but also their style of play. It turned out not to be much of a game. Chicago led by 17 after the third quarter and then went on to win by 21 in the Palace at Auburn Hills. Michael Jordan had 29 to lead all scorers. Scottie Pippen added 23 and dished out 10 assists. But the most memorable thing about this game, and really this series, is what the Pistons did with 7.9 seconds left in the game. They walked off the court. Well, more specifically, they walked past the Bulls bench. Didn't shake their hands, look them in the eye, or say anything. They just walked off the court to the locker room. It was just one more thing in the Pistons pastiche, right? They couldn't even say congrats. As columnist Michael Wilbon put it, the Pistons were classless thugs who behaved like anything but champions while being swept out of the NBA playoffs by the Chicago Bulls. For the Bulls, the win was cathartic, with Jordan saying, "We wanted to play Detroit in the conference finals because we wanted to beat their kind of basketball." Phil Jackson said that they felt it was time for the NBA to move on to another style of basketball. He said, "We're a lot like LA, and that's good basketball to watch." The Bulls would go on to play the Lakers in the finals and beat them 4-1 to win their first of 3 straight NBA titles. In 1991, it was a strange end to the Indianapolis 500. In fact, it was kind of strange all around. First off, May 27th of 91 was a Tuesday. Rain had completely washed out the race on Sunday, and after getting 15 laps on the board on Monday, rain came back and delayed the completion until Tuesday. Secondly, 2 cars that had been bumped and had not qualified for the race were added back to the grid. So instead of the traditional 33 cars, there were 35 cars starting on the grid on Monday. But it got a little stranger, as 3 cars crashed on the parade laps and 2 others suffered mechanical issues, so only 30 cars took the green flag. With 20 laps to go in the race, the leader was Jeff Ward by about 12 seconds, but he was in desperate need for a fuel top-off. Tony Stewart was running second and was also short on fuel and had to go in conservative mode. 2 guys who had plenty of petrol were Scott Goodyear and Arie Luyendyk, unless something happened to give Ward and Stewart an opportunity to get fuel. And that happened with 11 laps to go when Steve Kinzer wrecked. Ward and Stewart brought their thirsty race cars to pit road, but Goodyear and Luyendyk stayed out. With 8 to go, Luyendyk made a pass on the outside of his teammate to take the lead. And with 2 to go, Tony Stewart brushed the wall, bringing out another caution. But what happened next was controversial. The pace car never came out. So while the cars slowed, the field didn't get bunched back up. Most of the drivers thought the race would end under caution, and Luyendyk would just take a parade lap. Instead, the USAC official in the stand pulled the green and white flag out and started waving as the cars came down the front stretch, restarting the race with 1 lap to go. Goodyear in second was caught off guard, and Luyendyk got a great jump. But here's the other thing. Lights around the track were still yellow, signaling the race was still under caution. there was a lot of confusion, and Goodyear never mounted any serious threat on the final lap. For Luyendyk, it was his second and final Indianapolis 500 win for him. In 1937, pitcher Carl Hubbell beat the Cincinnati Reds 3-2, but it wasn't an ordinary run-of-the-mill win. It was Hubbell's 24th straight victory. But he didn't pull this one off as a starter. Instead, he came on in the 8th inning as a reliever, with the game tied at 2. He got the Reds to hit 3 ground balls to get out of the inning. Mel Ott provided a little run support in the 9th with a solo shot into the right field bleachers. Hubbell got 3 more successive outs in the 9th and picked up the win, improving to 8-0 on the season. Coupled with the 16 wins he closed out the 1936 season with, Hubbell had now won 24 consecutive decisions. He actually had bested the previous mark earlier in the year when he won his 22nd straight game. But the 24th was his last in the line. He lost the next time out. Hubbell's 24-game winning streak is the longest in Major League Baseball history. In 2012, golfer Zach Johnson did the right thing, forgot about it, and it nearly cost him a win on the PGA Tour. The tour was in Texas for the Colonial, and here on the final day and the final hole, Johnson was sitting on a 3-shot lead. He was playing with Jason Dufner, and after Johnson's birdie effort came up a little short, his ball was in Dufner's line. He used his putter head to move the ball mark out of the way, and Dufner punted. But Johnson forgot about moving his mark and didn't move it back, putting his ball down on the relocated spot. He rolled in the putt for what he thought was a par and a 3-shot win. It wasn't until a few minutes later, as he was being interviewed on television about the win, that he was told of his error. His failure to move his ball mark back to its original spot cost him a 2-shot penalty. Fortunately, he had not signed his card yet and was able to put down a 6 instead of 4. Had he signed for the 4 on the 18th, he would have been penalized another 2 shots and would have lost the tournament. And in 1968, legendary Chicago Bears coach George Halas retired from coaching. In his 40 years of coaching, he led Chicago to 6 titles and only had 6 losing seasons during that span. Time now for today's non-sports Did You Know? There are more possible variations of a game of chess than there are atoms in the known universe. This was put forth by mathematician Claude Shannon, with the calculation being that the number of chess moves is in the range of 10 to the 111th power on the low end to 10 to the 123rd power on the upper end. That's all for today. Thanks for stopping by, and hopefully I'll see you tomorrow for another edition of This Dish. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.